I'll have just one addition. When sir was presenting that case in which there was a lot of movement of the stent, I was attending one conference. That time they demonstrated a very simple technique to keep the stent still. In that, what they did is they just passed a plain guide wire through the guiding catheter and kept it in the sinus. The wire was just touching the wall of the sinus and it was just hanging around there. And then another wire was crossed to cross the lesion. And once the guiding catheter got the support of this wall of the aorta and the sinus, the movement of the stent reduced by more than 90% and they were able to deploy the stent successfully in those situations. And they demonstrated, I think, almost 6 or 7 cases in which there was a lot of movement of the stent, and the moment they used this technique, they just kept the wire through the guiding catheter, not crossing any of the coronary, just kept it hanging in the sinus, just touching the wall of the sinus and hanging in the aorta. And then they took another wire and then through that wire they deployed the stent. So that is one good strategy which I saw, and I used it in 1 or 2 of my cases and I found that to be very, very useful. So that is one way you can make your stent stable. Another, they say you can increase the rate by using a temporary pacemaker, but just like what we do in aortic valvuloplasty. But I have never used it, but some people have recommended that. That is another way of stabilizing. But I don't know, in a patient who has critical block and you are trying to induce the rate at such high rate, whether it is good or not. But this wire technique I found really helpful.
Yeah, actually, after doing this case, I deliberately talked to many people because the experience was quite terrible. I still get nightmares about this case. So there are a few tips which I got. One was already elaborated by him, and I think that's really important. Put another wire, or you can put a buddy wire. I mean, that's what some people told me, that you just put another wire and it will increase the degree of profile locally and it will reduce the movement. One more trick which somebody told me was this happens more frequently with the XB stents, the EBU or XB stents, these guides, not stents. This is less common with Judkins catheter because it has got 2 curves and the to and fro movement with Judkins is less than an XB catheter. The third thing which I was told about was this is more common with hydrophilic guide wires. Because there is very little friction and the stent keeps on moving in and out. The tachycardia thing was also mentioned by somebody, and at the end people also mentioned about the Szabo technique which is used to anchor the LAD ostium. So you can do one of these things, but the technique which I thought was successful in the subsequent case was you just push the guide in up to the LAD ostium, and then once you push it up to the ostium, the stent will not come back. Don't give any chance for the stent to come back in the left main.
In those cases, why don't you have gone for the left main coronary stenting? Why for the ostial and related complications when the ostial stenosis is also there?
Well, again, I thought the angle of circumflex was favorable and I would not compromise it, and I'm fairly good at putting stents at the ostium. I've done it quite often before, and I never had this kind of situation before. So it was, I mean, your question is valid, but this is just a matter of personal choice.
Dr. Ajit, regarding that case, the IABP insertion time was, I think, a little delayed.
I thought I put it at the first possible opportunity because there was no chance to put it before that. There was no pulse.
No pulse at all.
There was no pulse for 11 minutes. There was continuous CPR.
So IBP will not work if there is absolutely no pressures. At pressure of 40, 50, it never works. So I think the cardiac massage was the best possible option.
And I mean, I did not even think about it because I knew that it is going to be extremely difficult to do it in that situation.
See, IABP is not the alternative for cardiac massage, but thing is, anyway, we know the clinical situation and scenario where we are going to lose. And at some point of time, definitely we need the extra support of IABP. So simultaneously, I think the teamwork at least should have the access from the left side.
For IABP to work, there should be pulse. I mean, there was no pulse. Even if I put, let's imagine I got the artery and I put it in the aorta. there is no rhythm. It won't help.
Yeah, actually, just make a comment regarding IABP and LMCA. I don't remember when, but I think it's about 15-20 years back, there was a very elegant study which actually showed that any issue which is related with LMCA, the thing which is most important and makes a difference is IABP. Actually, suppose we start cardiac massage and try to open up that LMCA, they had poorer outcomes than patients in whom IABP was put first and then the LMCA was opened up. So that's the reason why most of the operators, once they have a problem with LMCA, the first thing they feel is the best thing to do is put in IABP. Not that we don't do cardiac massage, continue cardiac massage, put in IABP, then go behind the LMCA. Because for some reason, if and IABP can be put just on an internal mode and allowed to pump, that itself gives enough amount of circulation to make sure that the patient is there till you open up the LMCA. I don't know what others' experience is on that.
But generally you need a pressure of at least 60 millimeters of mercury before it starts.
No, that is true,
Point was he
Rajiv.
was not able to feel the pulse, so it was no time. And
I mean, I'm not sure how many of us would be able to put an intra-aortic balloon pump when there is CPR going on and there is no pulse. It will be technically extremely difficult.
I would have done exactly the way you have done actually. At the first possible available circumstantial evidence, IBP is mandatory. I am not saying IBP is not required, but whether, the way he has quoted study, but once the patient is absolutely no pulse, no BP, and you are doing cardiac massage, at this time, whether IBP is going to work or not, I'm not very sure about it.
Sir, this is the question to the Professor Sampath Kumar and the chairperson. Suppose we are doing a septal puncture and the operator has known to that actually RA perforation or a LA perforation. At that time, pericardiocentesis and all these things we are doing. At that time, hemodynamic compromise, whether to go ahead and do the balloon inflation at that time or leave it alone and send to immediately to the surgery, sir.
no, if your balloon is already there in the left atrium, see if you are having tamponade before your in the initial stage of puncture like that, then we don't advise.
So the balloon is there in the LV?
See, sometimes what happens, the tamponade manifests after a few seconds or a minute like that. By that time, already your balloon is in the left atrium. Then you enter and dilate the wall, because then you can tackle the tamponade well. Not that when you are, initial puncture or positioning itself, you had a tamponade by injuring the right atrium or some other thing. I don't advise you to enter the left atrium and dilate all those things.
Right. Thank you.
Regarding this IABP, there is not much of controversy. If someone is being given advanced cardiac life support, and unless there is a perfusing rhythm, you should not go for any other supporting things. So once advanced cardiac life support is being given, your aim is to get a perfusing rhythm. Until then, you have to give good cardiac massage and airway support.
Hi, I think this is a great flurry of cases, and if I could just make a comment or two on each of those actually. With this first one, with the rotational atherectomy, I think it's a very common problem that happens, the entrapment of a burr, especially the small one. And the most frequent cause for that is probably the non-coaxial guiding catheter if it is in the ostium of the right coronary artery. If it is the most other likely place for it to happen is the left main, when there is a right angle takeoff of the circumflex. And we're looking at now 500 rotational atherectomies that we've done. We avoid it. We make sure that we are coaxial. We take shorter guiding catheters. And when we're doing ostial and proximal coronary arteries, it's very important to make multiple views and make sure you're coaxial before you actually advance the burr. I think coaxial burrs and wire biases cause that most of the time. It happens very often in under-deployed stents as well, and I'm going to talk about it later. Ajit, I think your case was nasty. We've had this experience in 2003, 2004. I almost sent three patients as a cohort to, for publication. Satyavan Sharma and myself, we actually compiled these cases together. the problem that you had was most frequently described in those years with the right coronary artery with inferior wall infarctions. And this is purely a phenomena of no flow. And I think what you discussed about the oscillation of your stent because of guide catheter movements, I think you described very well the remedies for that. But what you had in terms of hemodynamic problem was probably because of a thrombus and an overwhelming burden of thrombus which migrated down probably. We've seen this often. It has been described. And what I do is, Ajit, even if you don't see, and if you see a patent lumen, run in thromboaspiration, and you would be surprised what you get even in these arteries. And in all these infarcts, from the kind of ECG that I saw, it was a threatening infarct, really. And in these kind of infarcts, priming the distal bed with a thromboaspiration catheter distally after you've done a few runs is vital. We've learned our lessons. I have three mortality. We have 3 patients who died on us in the years 2002 to 2004. And we started thromboaspiration in 2004. We started off using adenosine into distal arteries. We go up to around 1 to 2 milligrams of adenosine in aliquots of 100 micrograms till you get an absolute amazing blush and then deploy stents. The problem happens when you don't have that blush. And it has been described, so I think you could have thromboaspiration.
Yeah, just a comment, Kirti. Very important comments. I appreciate it. Still, I don't know whether it was a left main dissection or a thrombus or just some distal embolization of the thrombus. I still don't know what happened because there was no time to look at the angiogram. Even I looked at it later, but I still don't know what exactly went wrong. The stent was deployed in a blinded situation because he had already VFib when I deployed the stent.
Right.
So I still don't know what exactly must have happened.
All these patients, actually, they have terrible arrhythmias which happen during deployment because at that time, you're thrashing the distal bed. And it's been well described. It used to be, it was described beautifully by Don Baim in his paper, the Vegas paper, which described the angiojet in acute MI. And it happened most of the times with the right coronary artery. With the left coronary artery is less seen, but proximal LAD is the nasty bed which causes this problem. But I think great cases, and of course, Dr. Sampath, what a flurry of BMV cases you've done. I always appreciated your talk. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone. Congratulations for the speakers who got into the trouble and came out successfully, especially Dr. Ajit case. I think it is memorable, and the ECG surprisingly was absolutely normal despite all those VT storm and almost torsade depoint is for, I think, 12 minutes, 14 minutes, no pressure. Congrats.